You know what is strangely hard to admit? Hearing something good happen to someone you care about, smiling for them, saying all the right words, and then feeling a small sting somewhere underneath it all. Not hatred, not malice, just a brief, uncomfortable shift, a tightening in the chest, a sudden comparison, a thought you did not invite. Why them and not me? That moment is so common, and yet most people treat it like a secret flaw. We talk about anger, we talk about anxiety, loneliness, confidence, even self esteem, but jealousy tends to stay hidden because it feels embarrassing, it feels petty, it feels socially unacceptable. So instead of trying to understand it, we bury it under politeness, sarcasm, distance, or guilt. But from the perspective of psychology, jealousy is not just an ugly emotion that appears out of nowhere. It is a signal, a pattern, a form of perception. Sometimes it is irrational, sometimes it is painfully accurate, and very often it is trying to tell you something important about your fears, your attachments, your self worth, and the way your mind measures safety in a social world. That is the hidden psychology of jealousy. Not just what it looks like on the surface, but why it shows up, why it can feel so intense, and why people who seem calm, mature, intelligent, and emotionally aware can still be overwhelmed by it. Because jealousy is not simply about wanting what someone else has, that is part of it, but it is not the whole story. Jealousy is usually about threat, a threat to your place, a threat to your bond, a threat to your identity, a threat to the version of yourself you are trying very hard to protect. And that is why it can appear in so many different situations. You can feel jealous in romantic relationships, of course. That is the most obvious example. But people also feel jealous of friends, siblings, coworkers, classmates, strangers online, even people they claim not to like. They feel it when someone else gets attention, affection, recognition, opportunities, beauty, status, peace of mind, or a kind of ease they themselves have had to fight for. Sometimes the jealousy is loud. It becomes accusation, control, passive aggression, gossip, criticism, emotional withdrawal. Sometimes it is quiet. It becomes overthinking, huangyi, hypervigilance, low mood, self-doubt, or a strange urge to minimize another person's success. And because it is uncomfortable, people usually explain it away. They say, I'm not jealous, I'm just being realistic. I'm not jealous, I just don't trust people. I'm not jealous, I just notice things. I'm not jealous, I just think they don't deserve it. Maybe. Sometimes that is true, but psychology gives us a more useful explanation. Very often, jealousy is a collision between external events and internal vulnerabilities. In other words, the event is real, but the intensity comes from somewhere deeper. To understand this, it helps to separate jealousy from envy because people often use them as if they mean the same thing. Envy is usually about wanting something someone else possesses: their talent, their income, their appearance, their life, their confidence. Jealousy is more relational. It is the fear of losing something that matters to you, especially to another person. Envy says, I want what they have. Jealousy says, I'm afraid what I have is being taken, replaced, or threatened. But in real life, these emotions often mix together. You might envy someone's beauty and feel jealous that your partner notices it. You might envy a coworker's promotion and feel jealous that your own efforts no longer seem important. The mind does not always keep these categories neat and tidy. It responds to threat in a more emotional, messy way. And that threat is the key. From an evolutionary point of view, jealousy makes a certain kind of sense. Human beings are social creatures. For most of our history, survival depended not only on food or shelter, but on belonging, attachment, status, alliance, and trust. To lose a mate, a protector, a social bond, or your place in a group could carry serious consequences. So the brain evolved to notice social danger very quickly. That means jealousy is not random, it is part of a larger threat detection system. The same mind that scans for physical danger also scans for relational danger. A change in someone's tone, a delayed reply, a new friendship, a shift in attention, a comparison, a joke that lands strangely, a name appearing too often in conversation. These tiny things can trigger a surprisingly large emotional response because your nervous system is not only asking, what is happening? It is also asking, am I still safe here? This is one reason jealousy can feel so immediate. It often arrives before logic, before language, before a calm explanation. Your body reacts first, your thoughts catch up later. And that matters because people often judge themselves for jealousy as if it were a deliberate decision. But many emotional reactions are not choices in the beginning. They are fast interpretations shaped by memory, attachment, and prior experience. What you do after the feeling arrives is where choice becomes more important. But the feeling itself often emerges automatically. Attachment theory helps explain a lot here. John Bowlby and later researchers suggested that our earliest relationship experiences shape how we expect closeness to work. If love felt consistent, responsive, and safe, you may grow up with a stronger sense that important bonds can survive distance, ambiguity, and normal uncertainty. If love felt unpredictable, conditional, intrusive, or emotionally unavailable, jealousy may become much easier to trigger. A person with anxious attachment, for example, may be especially sensitive to signs of abandonment or rejection. They may monitor small changes in behavior, look for doubt that something is wrong, and experience intense low lang when a partner seems distant. To an outside observer, this can look dramatic or controlling, but from the inside, it often feels like emergency management. Their system is trying to prevent loss before it happens. Someone with avoidant attachment may look less jealous on the surface, but that does not necessarily mean they are unaffected. Their jealousy may be hidden beneath emotional shutdown, detachment, irony, or a habit of acting like nothing matters. Instead of saying, "I'm afraid of losing you," they may become colder, more independent, or quietly competitive. The Kamsuk is still there. It is just processed through distance rather than pursuit. This is one of the secrets of human behavior that psychology keeps revealing again and again. Two people can have the same fear and express it in completely opposite ways. One clings, one disappears, one demands reassurance, one acts like reassurance is unnecessary. One becomes visibly jealous, one becomes emotionally unreadable. But underneath both patterns, there may be the same core question. Am I enough to be chosen, kept, and valued? That question is deeply connected to self-esteem, not the loud, performative version, the real thing, the private sense of worth that shapes how you interpret the world. When self-esteem is fragile, jealousy becomes easier to activate because other people's success, attention, or desirability is not experienced as neutral information. It becomes a verdict. Their beauty becomes evidence of your inadequacy. Their promotion becomes proof of your failure. Their social ease becomes a reminder of your awkwardness. Their happiness becomes a mirror reflecting what you believe is missing in your own life. In that state, comparison is not just a habit, it becomes a way the mind explains reality. And comparison is one of the most powerful psychological engines behind jealousy. Leon Festinger's social comparison theory suggested that people evaluate themselves partly by comparing themselves to others. This is normal. It is a basic part of self-assessment. The problem is that the modern social world has turned this mechanism into an endless machine. You no longer compare yourself only to a few people in your village, school, workplace, or neighborhood. You compare yourself to hundreds of carefully filtered lives every week. You see people's milestones without seeing their panic, their beauty without their insecurity, their relationships without their conflict, their achievements without their years of invisible frustration. So your perception becomes distorted. You begin measuring your whole life against another person's highlight reel. That distortion feeds jealousy because the mind hates unexplained disadvantage. It wants a reason, it wants a story. So it starts building one. They have what I deserve. People value them more than me. I'm falling behind. I'm being replaced. There must be something wrong with me. This is where jealousy starts to blend with shame, and that combination can be especially painful. Jealousy says, I fear losing what matters. Shame says, and I believe the reason is that I am less worthy. When those two combine, the emotional experience becomes much heavier. It is no longer only about the other person, it becomes about your entire identity. And when identity is threatened, people do interesting things. Some become suspicious. They overread every detail. They search for hidden meanings, hidden motives, hidden betrayal. Their mind becomes a detective story. Others become critical. They start noticing flaws in the person they envy or the person they fear losing. This is a protective habit. If the other person is reduced, mocked, or devalued, then the threat feels smaller. Others become perfectionistic. They decide they must become more attractive, more productive, more desirable, more unforgettable, not because growth is bad, but because their nervous system has equated worth with safety. In each case, the behavior is different, but the Doberkammer is 1 second from the Takdemit. Psychology is similar. Jealousy is trying to repair a threatened sense of security. Now, this is where things become more nuanced, because jealousy is not always irrational. Sometimes it is a reaction to actual inconsistency, emotional neglect, secrecy, triangulation, favoritism, or betrayal. Sometimes your discomfort is not just insecurity. Sometimes your perception is picking up real changes in the environment. The challenge is that jealousy can make accurate people look paranoid and paranoid people look accurate. The feeling itself does not tell you whether the threat is real, it only tells you that your system believes something important is at risk. That is why understanding jealousy requires more than just saying, trust yourself, or stop overthinking. It requires asking better questions. What exactly feels threatened? What story am I telling myself? Is this feeling coming from the present, the past, or both? What evidence do I actually have? What pattern in me does this situation activate? These questions slow the mind down. They move you from pure reaction into nunthuk. And that shift matters because jealousy is strongest when it stays vague. The less clearly you understand it, the more power it has. There is also another hidden side to jealousy that people do not talk about enough. Very often, we are most jealous in the areas that reveal our deepest values. If you feel jealous of someone's career, perhaps achievement matters more to your sense of self than you admit. If you feel jealous of someone's friendships, perhaps belonging is a deeper need than your independent persona allows. If you feel jealous of someone's peace, perhaps what you truly want is not admiration, but relief. This is why jealousy can be informative. Painful, yes. Socially awkward, absolutely, but informative. It points toward desire, fear, grief, and unmet needs. It reveals where your self-concept is vulnerable. It shows you which parts of life still feel unresolved. In that sense, jealousy is not only a sign of insecurity, it can also be a map to your unfinished emotional work, a map to your hidden standards, a map to the parts of yourself that still believe love, success, and belonging are scarce. Scarcity is a major part of this psychology. When the mind believes there is not enough attention, not enough beauty, not enough recognition, not enough love, another person's gain feels like your loss. Their success becomes your exclusion. Their closeness becomes your abandonment. Their uniqueness becomes your invisibility. This is why siblings can become jealous even when both are loved, why friends can become jealous when one enters a new relationship, why coworkers become tense when one person is praised, why people in loving relationships can still feel threatened by harmless interactions. The mind is not always responding to objective reality. It is often responding to perceived scarcity, and perceived scarcity is shaped by past experience. If you grew up having to compete for affection, if praise was rare, if attention came with conditions, if mistakes made you feel easily replaceable, then jealousy in adulthood may have less to do with the current moment than with an old survival strategy. Your system learned early that love had to be secured, monitored, and earned. That does not make your reactions foolish, it makes them understandable. This is the point where a lot of people feel something almost like relief, because being understood changes the experience. When you understand that jealousy is not simply proof that you are petty or broken, but a meaningful emotional response with roots in attachment, comparison, memory, self-esteem, and threat perception, something softens. You may still feel it, but you feel less ashamed of feeling it, and shame is often what makes jealousy worse. When people feel jealous, they frequently add a second emotion on top of it. They judge themselves for having the first one. So now they are not only threatened, they are also disgusted with themselves. That creates more secrecy, more denial, more defensiveness, and less honest reflection. The feeling then has nowhere healthy to go, so it leaks out sideways through sarcasm, resentment, coldness, control, or self-sabotage. What usually helps is not pretending the emotion is noble, but treating it as data. If jealousy is data, then what is it explaining? What wound is it touching? What need is it revealing? What belief is it protecting? Maybe it is telling you that you do not feel secure in a relationship. Maybe it is telling you that you have built your self-worth on comparison. Maybe it is telling you that you are lonely and have been calling it independence. Maybe it is telling you that you deeply want a life change and have been numbing that desire with distraction. This is where psychology becomes practical, because once jealousy is understood, it can be worked with. Not instantly fixed, not magically erased, but understood enough to reduce its control over your behavior. The first step is naming the real fear beneath it. Not just, I feel jealous. More specifically, I am afraid of being replaced. I am afraid I am falling behind. I am afraid I am not special to this person. I am afraid there is something lacking in me. Precision matters. Vague emotions feel overwhelming. Specific emotions become workable. The second step is separating feeling from fact. Feeling threatened does not always mean you are in danger. Feeling insecure does not always mean you are unworthy. Feeling suspicious does not always mean betrayal is happening. But at the same time, your feelings should not be dismissed. They are signals, not verdicts. They deserve curiosity, not blind obedience, and not total rejection. The third step is looking at the pattern over time. Is this a one-time reaction or one of your recurring habits? Does jealousy appear around certain kinds of people, certain settings, certain themes like beauty, intelligence, money, social status, loyalty, attention? Patterns reveal structure. Structure makes healing possible. The fourth step is communication, but only after self-reflection. Jealousy expressed too early often sounds like accusation. Jealousy expressed with self-awareness sounds different. It sounds like, I've noticed I get anxious in this situation and I'm trying to understand why. It sounds like, I think this touches on an old fear in me. It sounds like, I want to talk about what helps me feel secure without making you responsible for all of my feelings. That kind of honesty is difficult, but it is far more effective than pretending not to care or turning every fear into a fight. The fifth step is rebuilding self-esteem in a deeper way. Not by becoming better than everyone else. That strategy never ends. There will always be someone more attractive, more successful, more charismatic, more socially skilled, more lucky. If your confidence depends on winning every comparison, your nervous system will never rest. Real self-esteem grows when your worth becomes less dependent on constant external ranking. That means developing an identity that is not built entirely on being chosen, admired, or ahead. It means learning to value your own diem, your own pace, your own way of moving through the world. It means recognizing that another person's strengths do not automatically erase your own. Human value is not a single scoreboard, even though the social mind often acts as if it is. And there is one more thing. Jealousy often softens when grief is acknowledged, because beneath many jealous reactions, there is a quiet grief for something not received, the love you did not get consistently, the recognition you wanted, the version of yourself you thought you would be by now, the experiences that seem to come easily to other people but not to you. Sometimes what looks like jealousy is grief wearing sharper clothes. That matters because grief asks for compassion, not punishment. If you can see jealousy not only as a threat response but also as a messenger carrying old sadness, then your relationship with yourself begins to change. You become less harsh, less reactive, more honest. You start to understand that some of your most uncomfortable emotions are not enemies. They are attempts, however clumsy, to protect something tender. And that tenderness is very human. Everyone wants to feel significant. Everyone wants to feel chosen. Everyone wants to believe they matter, that they are not easily replaced, that their efforts count, that their presence means something. Jealousy grows wherever those needs feel unstable, so the goal is not to become someone who never feels jealous. That would be unrealistic and maybe not even healthy. The goal is to become someone who can recognize jealousy early, think it accurately, and respond to it without letting it dictate your hangvi. Someone who can say, this feeling is here, but it is not the whole truth. Someone who can tell the difference between intuition and insecurity. Someone who can pause before turning fear into control. Someone who can understand their own psychology well enough to stop making every comparison a crisis. That is a quieter kind of intelligence, but it is real intelligence. Emotional intelligence, relational intelligence, the kind that makes trust possible. Because trust is not the absence of fear, it is the ability to live without obeying every fearful thought your mind produces. And jealousy will produce many thoughts. It will tell you that you are behind, that you are forgettable, that everyone else is more desirable, more secure, more complete, that affection is fragile, that attention is disappearing, that you have to compete for your place. Sometimes those thoughts contain useful information, often they contain old distortions. Wisdom is learning the difference. The hidden psychology of jealousy, then, is not simply that it reveals insecurity. It reveals how the mind protects attachment, interprets status, measures worth, and remembers pain. It reveals what you fear losing, what you believe you lack, and what your nervous system still does not fully trust. And once you heal raw that, jealousy stops being just a shameful feeling in the dark. It becomes something else, a clue, a signal, a pattern, a very human experience asking to be understood before it is judged. So the next time you feel that sting, that small collapse inside, when someone else shines or someone you love turns their attention elsewhere, notice what your mind does next. Notice the story, notice the body, notice the old assumptions that rush in to explain what this must mean about you. And then ask the deeper question. Not, why am I like this, but what is this feeling trying to protect? That question changes everything because it moves you away from self-contempt and toward understanding. And understanding, in psychology, is often the beginning of change. Not dramatic change, not instant transformation, but the kind that matters most. The kind that makes you a little less ruled by fear, a little less trapped by comparison, a little more honest with yourself, a little more free.